So in order to give a model and a structure around the topic of asking with questions, we use a model called the GROW model, as you can see it there, GROW. And the GROW model stands for 4 different types of questions. Goal questions, questions related to the reality, questions about options, and questions about will or way. The GROW model is, I think it was developed in the 1960s, 1970s, certainly very well researched, very well documented in every language that we've looked at so far. Goal questions. What are the long-term goals? What are the short-term goals? We ask them at the beginning. We may or may not get an answer to them. Reality questions. We find out what's going on. What's the current situation? What's the status quo? We need to find enough information here to feel comfortable about moving on to the options questions, and also about going back to the goal questions and saying, so what do you want to achieve? Again, shorter term and longer term. Short term is within the context of this meeting. Long term is, what your longer term goal, whatever that time frame is. Now, the options stage is, for me personally, the very important piece. In your definition of coaching, Ioana, you spoke a lot about creativity and giving people the opportunity to find new ideas for themselves. And that really is crystallized in this options stage and the questions. I like to look at it in the following way. There are 2 types of options questions, the basic ones, and that's always the same. What could you do? What else? What else? What else? What else? What else? And the fear of sounding like a broken record, that's the job. Sound like a broken record, really try and get all of the current options on the table. Then the interesting options questions for me start with what if, What if you were president of the world? What if you had unlimited money? What if you had no restrictions? And these are the interesting questions and creative questions that try and make people look at their situation from a different perspective, that force creativity. I think the expression goes in English, creativity is the mother of invention. No, necessity is the mother of invention. You have to force people to get inventive. They have to feel this need before they start coming out with new stuff. Hence, 2 different types of options questions, the easy ones and the more complex ones. And that leads us on to the will or way questions. What will you do? And this could be as easy as selecting 2 or 3 of the options highlighted within that first stage, the options questions, and then saying, this is my action plan moving forward. So that's the GROW model. It is surprisingly difficult to use because everybody has got good ideas in their heads and wants to put them on the table. What are your thoughts?
So in terms of challenging of the GROW model, challenges, we have the establishing the goal, which can be sometimes very tricky because a coachee can come to you and say, my goal is this. And then you go on to the current situation and you explore that. And they just feel like, okay, wait a minute, maybe that's not my goal. Yeah, maybe I have another goal. Maybe the challenge is very different from what I thought it would be. Yeah. So what we try to do in this kind of situations, we go back to the goal all the time. So our job is to go back and say, okay, so does this goal still stand? What does that tell you? What does the current situation tell you? And just go back and clarify it until it becomes extremely clear and until the coachee is comfortable with it and says, yes, I think that's where I want to go.
So I have a question. When a coach is using the GROW model, to what degree should the coach be active and sharing their ideas and perspectives? Like, what about this for a goal? Or have you considered this option? And to what degree should the coach take a step back and ask open questions to allow the coachee to explore those ideas?
So, as human beings, we are very tempted to come with our own ideas, especially when we are coaches. We have the feeling that we have so much experience and we've heard so many people talk about their challenges and so on. But what I would suggest is, if you are a coach, you have to focus on asking the right questions, the magic questions that invite to thinking. And if you are tempted to give a solution, or if you have a solution, if you have an idea, you are welcome to share it, but only at the end of the session. So only after the option stage. I would say, as a coach, I would say, I may have an idea for you. Would you like to hear it? Yeah. But other than this situation, I wouldn't really go into a lot of advice. As a coach, I would avoid that.
I have a friend who saves his advice for the next day or the day afterwards.
Yeah.
And so he'll really try and just stick with questions in his discussions, and then if he's got great ideas, then he'll put them forward as suggestions the following day or the day after that. And he says that works quite well. He feels that it's not intrusive into the quality of the discussion itself.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds great. And I'm trying to kind of picture a grow model session. So what is the advice on how long an individual session should be? And within that session, should you always aim to have all 4 stages of the grow model?
I mean, to the second question first, sometimes you get into a discussion, and I'm sure we've all been part of this, and 30 minutes into the discussion, you just realize how overwhelmingly complicated this person's situation is. And you realize that breaking this down is really a matter of, I've kind of put that picture there at the top. There are so many different topics, and it is very difficult to manage them all within the context of the grow model. So you're funneling them down and then finally focusing on the one that's going to be important. In strict timing sense, I would aim for 40 minutes as being a maximum for one particular session. I would definitely split sessions over more than one session if that's required. It's a very flexible thing. There's no need to get everything done within one session. I do, however, work with a company, and they do speed coaching, which sounds quite fun. And they try to have a sensible conversation and a sensible question asking conversation in a 10-minute structure. And, this has been challenged a lot by a lot of different people, and saying, how can you get value into that short amount of time? And their answer is, well, you just need one good question, to make the difference, to get somebody thinking in a way that is really quite, galvanizing and motivational for them. But I would say with 40 minutes would be a good time frame. And definitely, if you hear the coachee beginning to repeat themselves, it's time to move on to the options stage, or time to finish that meeting and then schedule another one.
Okay, that sounds great. And so now I feel like I have a really good picture of the model and of a coaching session. But imagine if I have a coaching session, and at the end of it, after the session is finished, how do I make sure that my coachee is actually taking action?
That's a good question. So first of all, you are very, very careful with stage 4, the wheel questions. Yeah. So as a coach, you have to focus on making sure that the coachee is taking responsibility for action. Yeah. So you use questions like, what will you do? When will you do it? Who can support you doing it? What else do you need? So you go very deep into the details, and timing, and help them take responsibility for the next steps. So that's a first thing that you can do. The second thing that you can do, if you are a leader, it's your job to make sure that they follow up on that. So you set up follow-up meetings. Yeah, you can do that a week from today. You know, depending on the goal and the urgency. But you definitely, by the end of the first coaching session, you already need a follow-up session planned.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And final question, I've heard a lot about something called signposting. Now, I'm not quite sure what that is, Tim.
Signposting is a verbal communication method that you use to basically say, where are we in the process at the moment? So I'll give you an example. Imagine we're in a discussion and I say, so Mike, I think I've got a good understanding of the situation. Let's move back to the goal just to make sure we understand that what the goal is. What's the goal? Or for example, okay, we've got that goal established. Let's build some options around that goal. Let's spend the next 10 minutes really focused on what is possible. Or I might say, okay, that's taking us back into the reality. Let's go back and explore that situation a little bit more. So the technique of signposting is a mechanism of navigating through the model, which helps you to remember where you are and helps the coachee to understand where to go next. So it's a structural support tool.
One quick final question there, Tim. When using the GROW model, should you show the GROW model to your coachee before you use it?
At the end of the GROW model, if you've been taking notes as the coach, and it's always a good idea to do that, because you should free them up to describe and speak. And certainly you want to keep a list of all of those options. Then you would, figuratively, you would take off the results and hand it over to the coachee, because you want to hand over responsibility. It's their list, not yours, even though you've written it. When you're handing over the list, you might be using a GROW template or something like that. And so there is absolutely no problem at all in showing people the technique that you're using. This works very well in a team captain and a team lead environment where a leader has direct responsibility over a group of 5-10 people. And there is a good level of trust, a good level of dialogue within that group of people. And there's a curiosity to learn from the people as well. And then if you go along to them and say, guys, I've just been on a training, I'm going to be using a model called the GROW model to lead you through a discussion. And they will be very open to understanding what that is. And the quality of the discussions thereafter increases dramatically because people come prepared to those discussions. If you're going into a discussion where, Joanna comes into the room and you say, hey, Joanna, how's it going? She says, well, not really very good at the moment. And you say, okay, do you want to speak about it? Yes, please. Very helpful. Then you wouldn't, put the GROW model on the table and say, right, let's begin with the G, because that would seem a little bit weird. And especially if Joanna doesn't know what it is. And in that case, you would use it just as a kind of background framework for yourself to keep it in the back of your mind.
Right. I think I'm ready to coach.
Great. Well, in that case, let's do a demo.